1999 The Podcast is a production of the Cage Club Podcast Network. For more podcasts on movies, comics, and all things pop culture, head to cageclub.me. To contact us with questions, comments, or just to say hi, send us an email at 1999@cageclub.me. You can find me on Twitter at probablyrealjb and Joey at Soulpot. And you can follow the show on Twitter at 1999 The Podcast. To support the show, please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. The show is written, produced, and edited by us.
Hello and welcome to 1999 The Podcast. I'm Joey Lewandowski.
And I'm John Brooks.
And we are talking about the darkest, most sinister, most twisted director this side of M. Night Shyamalan in his only G-rated film. I'm sure we will talk about this with our guest in the episode, but John, do you have a history with David Lynch? Are you a David Lynch head? Do you like his movies? Do you hate his movies? I don't know this about you.
We will talk about this. I have a very hit and miss relationship with David Lynch.
I think that's what I would have guessed. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I love Twin Peaks. Mm-hmm. And I'm very iffy about most other things that he's done.
By the time this episode comes out, between now and then, I will have gone to the Double R Diner or whatever it's called, and hopefully also the falls, the actual falls from the opening of the movie.
You're going to Washington State?
I am. Washington State and Colorado.
I used to hike one of said Twin Peaks quite frequently. I've been to that diner many a times, and I've been to those falls many a times.
Do you know...
Yeah.
There is, I don't know if it's a national chain or maybe just a Texas thing. There is like a Hooters-like restaurant called Twin Peaks. And so when I was living in Texas and they're like, you know, I would just see like restaurants around Twin Peaks. I'm like, oh, that's so wild that like a kind of cult, but now beloved fan favorite show somehow spawned a restaurant. And then I looked it up. I'm like, oh, okay. I never went. I should have gone. Like if it was Hooters, but like Red Room theme, amazing. I don't think that's what it is, though. I think it's just
I don't think it is. I don't think Texas is that clever. North Bend is a very lovely town. I love it there. I don't think anything remotely scary or interesting has really ever happened there. But beautiful place, and have a good time. We'll talk about it when you get back.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready to talk about The Straight Story?
Is that today's movie?
That is today's movie.
That's what we're doing. Oh, cool. Yeah.
The Straight Story was released in the United States in October 1999. There's a little bit blurry dates. There's, festival releases and theater releases and limited releases and so on and so forth after a run of film festival screenings. Directed by renowned filmmaker David Lynch, the movie tells a true story of Alvin Straight, an elderly World War II veteran living with his intellectually disabled daughter. Because this is a, pardon the pun, pretty straightforward production story, John, can you tell us what the movie's about before I go any further?
You basically just did.
I know. I was like, yeah.
So it's the true-ish story of Alvin Straight. I mean, I think they take some liberties and obviously invent some conversations and that sort of thing. But a real-life figure who, at the age of 73, traveled across the Midwest on a ride-on mower to visit his estranged brother in Wisconsin after he suffers a stroke. And in the movie, he, along the way, meets a bunch of people and talks to a bunch of people. And that is pretty much the entire movie.
Mm-hmm. Which is funny, and I'll get to it later. I have it here. But David Lynch calls this his most experimental film because it is...
That's
the
so
least
interesting.
Experimental thing.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Well, I think that's something to be said for that. But we'll
sure.
get to that. Mm-hmm.
So originally, producer Ray Stark had acquired the rights to the story and envisioned it as a Paul Newman film. Nothing ever came of that, though. And when the rights became available, David Lynch's longtime partner, so you were asking me about, like, you were saying today about, like, I mean, this is such a straightforward production story. And you said something along the lines of, like, but why is David Lynch involved? And here, again, very simple, straightforward. Had this longtime partner and collaborator, Mary Sweeney.
Right.
She's just like, I like the story. Let's do it. So she co-wrote the script with her childhood friend, Joan Roach. They were initially inspired by an article about Alvin Straight's remarkable journey, which resonated with her. Quote, growing up in Wisconsin, I easily connected with that kind of stoic, nonverbal, stubborn, idiosyncratic American character. I get how hard it is to have quiet pride and dignity when you're old and poor and living in the middle of nowhere. I understand what these people's dreams and frustrations are, and I loved how much of his journey captured the national imagination. So wearing my producer's hat, I started trying to secure the rights. So it's just like, she liked the story, he liked the story, they did it.
Mm-hmm.
Richard Farnsworth, a first choice for the role of Alvin Straight, accepted the role despite battling terminal cancer at the time. Farnsworth, a longtime actor and stuntman, was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for the film Comes a Horseman and a Golden Globe nomination for The Gray Fox. More on him in a little bit. Filming took place independently along the actual route taken by Straight, with scenes shot chronologically in autumn of '98. The production faced challenges as Farnsworth's health declined during filming, but he remained dedicated and tenacious. Tragically, he passed away the following year. Farnsworth is joined on screen by Sissy Spacek, who plays his daughter, and Harry Dean Stanton, who plays his brother, and only appears in the film's final minutes. Longtime Lynch collaborator Everett McGill, Chris Farley's brothers Kevin and John, and returning 1999 The Podcast all-star James Cada? Do you know who this man is?
Yeah.
Brittany Murphy's father in Drop Dead Gorgeous.
That's right, yep.
Fill out the cast of largely non-actors. Angelo Badalamenti, a longtime collaborator of David Lynch, composed the film's score. The film earned a G rating, a rarity for a Lynch film, after a successful debut at Cannes, where it earned a Palme d'Or nomination. It was acquired by Walt Disney Pictures for release in the United States. It would go on to garner other awards too, including an Oscar nomination for Farnsworth, who was the oldest nominee in the category at the time, but he, like almost every other nominee... Okay, side note. I remember what year we're doing, but every time I do one of these intros and we get an Oscar nomination, I'm like, oh, what won that year? I still don't remember. The answer is always going to be American Beauty.
American Beauty. Mm-hmm.
Every single time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I wonder what won. Oh, right. So he, like everything else, lost to American Beauty. He did, Farnsworth, however, win at the Independent Spirit Awards and the New York Film Critics Circle, and Lynch won a couple of smaller directorial awards as well. The Straight Story wasn't especially commercially successful. It finished 147th in the 1999 box office, earning $6 million on a $10 million budget, with virtually no overseas box office at all, but it was critically acclaimed, especially as it seemed out of the norm for Lynch, who would go on to call it his, quote, most experimental film, as I said earlier. Roger Ebert gave it 4 out of 4 stars, the first positive review he'd ever given for a film by Lynch, writing, quote, the movie isn't just about the old Alvin Straight's odyssey through the sleepy towns and rural districts of the Midwest, but about the people he finds to listen and care for him.
Ebert, it reminds me of something very funny that David Lynch once did, which is that Ebert, so Lost Highway came out in 96 or 97? 97. So 2 years earlier, Ebert, as is wont to do, panned Lost Highway because he hates all of David Lynch's movies. And the like full page, newspaper splashes of movies with the poster and then the quotes from the critics. Lynch personally had the bad review pull quote from Roger Ebert plastered across the Lost Highway ad. It was very funny.
Well, that's now in theaters, although it'll still be in theaters by the time this comes out, but they're not using it as official marketing promotion, but someone on Twitter, X, found or is pulling negative reviews, 1-star reviews from male letterbox users about Barbie and putting it under the Barbie title on a poster, and just it just makes it better. Just they want us all to be women. It's just okay, sure, that sounds like a great marketing campaign for the movie. Marketing's fun.
Sure.
Anyway, Ebert was not alone. The film has a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes based on more than 100 reviews, a 91% audience score, and an 86 on Metacritic.
Wow.
Several critics called it Lynch's best work since Blue Velvet, which means that they liked it more than Lost Highway and Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me and Wild at Heart. And a lot of movies that I also really love. Scott Tobias of the AV Club proclaimed Lynch, quote, discovered the pure mythical slice of Americana previously confined to Agent Cooper's coffee and donuts in Twin Peaks. Slate's David Edelstein said Lynch, quote, slowed the world down and got back in touch with it. Glenn Lavelle of the San Jose Mercury News called it, quote, easily the best American film of the year. I had to hunt for a while to see what our boys at TNT Rough Cut thought about it. I think I found it, and I think they gave it a mixed review saying it was too slow.
Not rough enough?
Not rough enough. I did not find that on Rotten Tomatoes. I had to find that in Metacritic, and they didn't have a full review, so who knows where that actually exists.
Too many gentle cuts for them.
Only 2 of Rotten Tomatoes' top critics gave it negative reviews. The Los Angeles Times' Kenneth Turan called it, quote, too mannered and weird around the edges to be convincing.
Kenneth Turan? No! That
New
is
York
incorrect.
Magazine's Peter Rayner called Lynch a tourist as he struggled to reckon with the film as both a film and as a David Lynch film.
That's interesting.
I'm not sure why I chose to end the intro on a down note, because this is one of my favorite films we'll cover for this podcast. So without any further ado, John, who is our guest to talk about The Straight Story?
Our guest is pop culture critic and movie critic and fan, Julia Sirmons.
Well, we will be right back with Julia.
And we're back, and we're here with Julia. Hello, Julia. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
We are very well. Thank you for joining us. I did the briefest of introductions of you in the intro, but would you care to introduce yourself in your own in your own words?
Yeah, briefly. I'm just a film writer, I guess I'd say, and normally write about kind of spectacle and stuff in film, whether that's like movie musicals or melodrama or production design or horror. So this is a cool chance to do something a little bit different.
Yeah.
Before we go further about this, we're recording a little bit early. This isn't going to be out for about a month or so, but we are in the week of spectacle. We are in the Barbenheimer week. Any thoughts on Barbenheimer? Have you seen Barbie and/or Oppenheimer yet?
I actually haven't, because I'm living in kind of rural-ish Colorado right now, and
okay.
I'm waiting for a chance to have access to the car, the one.
You could always take a lawnmower to go see.
Yeah.
A movie.
Good. There's no excuse to not go anywhere because of a car if there's a lawnmower available.
There is one that was very noisy outside this morning, so I could totally steal it and go to the Bowtie Cinema.
Sorry, losers, I'm going to go see Barbie, and then just speed away at 5 miles an hour.
I have to do this my own way.
Julia, I asked this of John in the opening, and he gave me a very cryptic answer, but what is your history with David Lynch? What is your history with this film? When was the first time you saw that? What was the first of his you saw? Just wherever you want to go with this, your history with the man of the hour and also this film.
So I became a film studies major in college pretty quickly, and we had this great movie theater on campus. And so I'm pretty sure I saw it there. They would do different programs, and they had a David Lynch, retrospective where you could see everything. And I'm sorry to say, as I fancied myself a very dark and twisty person in college and surrounded myself with similar people, I kind of dismissed it, as opposed to the others, which were very stylized and cool.
Yeah.
And I have not seen it again since this week, so I'm very excited to talk about it.
Do you remember your first Lynch film? Because I'm trying to figure that out too for me, because I don't know the answer to that question.
I'm pretty sure it was Mulholland Drive, because I watched that. I rented that on DVD before.
What the hell's that?
I remember watching it in my little TV I was allowed to have in my room, and
that is also how I first saw Mulholland Drive. I rented it on DVD and watched it in college.
Okay. Can I ask you, did your DVD copy have the little insert, which is here's how you can figure out what this movie's about? And there were 10 questions.
No, I've seen that. No, it's great. David Lynch is if you watch the intro, you can pick up 10 clues in the first 90 seconds. And I'm like, bullshit, you cannot. That might be my favorite movie. I don't even know if it's my favorite Lynch movie, but that's also might be my favorite movie. But I'm like, there's nothing in there. Come on, what are we doing? What are we talking about?
Yeah. Well, I was young and dumb enough to really try. It was a little try hard. So I really wanted to figure it out. And then it took me a couple years to realize that's not how you are meant to experience this movie.
No, I was just yeah, I get it. Sure, it's a good movie. I think I had a lot of people who were doing that with Donnie Darko at the time, being here's my map of how Donnie Darko is to be interpreted. I'm like, whatever, sure, fine. I guess that's
whatever.
I
don't know. I guess we do that on Twitter now. I don't know.
Julia, I please call it X.
X. Yeah. It's not referring to it by its dead name.
Yeah.
Julia, were you a Twin Peaks person, or did you not get at all into David Lynch until your college days?
No, I was a little too young for Twin Peaks.
Okay.
I found out my parents watched it,
Yeah.
and I was like, you were that cool in the 80s?" And they're like, "Well, we watched it until it got too weird."
So 4 episodes in.
Yeah. So I watched that. I think I only really watched it when it became streaming on Hulu, actually. So
Nice.
relatively
Yeah.
late, but it was like a delightful treat to.
I was too young too, but I still watched it.
Was Picket Fences like Twin Peaks but less dark?
Kind of.
'Cause
Yeah.
my parents watched that, and they
Yeah.
watched like other stuff I feel like was in the Twin Peaks kind of like realm, but I almost guarantee you they did not watch Twin Peaks.
Yeah. It was less weird. I mean, Twin Peaks was mostly weird more than it was dark, right? That's sort of David Lynch.
It's pretty. Okay, let's talk about the premise of the show.
Yeah, sure. But like, I think dark. I think like David Fincher, right? Like Lynch is like,
Well, it's supernaturally dark, which is a different kind of dark, right?
foggy.
Like it's a different.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You
John, you want to elaborate on your cryptic answer in the opening?
Yeah, sure. My brother watched Twin Peaks. I watched Twin Peaks with him.
You have a brother?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm learning so much.
I have an older brother who I saw a lot of movies with when I was a teenager, and a lot of the stuff that I probably was like too young to be watching, I watched because he watched. I would say I was around like 11 or 12-ish when Twin Peaks was happening, like early 90s. I don't remember, but yeah, I like Twin Peaks. I like David Lynch. I like the whole sort of like weird, mysterious vibe. Then when I was a little older, like in high school, I think I saw like Blue Velvet, which I didn't love, and I didn't really like a lot of his movies. They were just a little too, I don't know, a little too out there for me. But I did see when I was, so Lost Highway came out when I was 18, and I did see that and really liked that a lot. I liked Fire Walk with Me. I don't know. It's just always been like, I've never been able to kind of all in on David Lynch. And I think that's kind of also a feature of David Lynch. Like part of what kind of makes him interesting is that you never really know if you're going to jive with what he's doing. I like Mulholland Drive a lot. But this is, to me, somehow this is like his not just best movie, but in rewatching it today, I saw a lot more of those kind of Lynchian elements that I kind of missed the first time I watched it. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later. But like, Joey, when did you like? I know you love David Lynch. I think you're the biggest Lynchy.
Yeah, I'm of the mind he's basically made like 8 perfect movies and then also Dune.
Yeah.
Like it's hard for me to rank because I love them all so much. Like 2 years ago, I rewatched Twin Peaks and I watched all of his movies, and like I love this movie so much. I think I was trying to find out the first, because like Julia, when I went to college, like I'd basically seen like no movies, and I watched like all of the movies for the first and kind of only time I've seen most of these movies. So here's my little run. Straight Story's not in here, but I saw in a row, probably the span of like 2 or 3 weeks. For the first time, Ghostbusters, E.T., Rushmore, Dawn of the Dead, Die Hard, Wild at Heart, Full Metal Jacket, The Simpsons movie, okay, Blue Velvet, Blood Simple, Inland Empire,
wow,
Eraserhead, The Shining. Like that was all in like 3 weeks for the first time.
Important question, was it the original Dawn of the Dead?
Yes, it was the original Dawn of the Dead. I like both of them, but that was the original Dawn of the Dead. I have in parentheses original. But then I saw The Straight Story when I like kind of filled out the rest of his filmography like a year or so later. Like I watched Eraserhead, I saw Eraserhead, like Elephant Man and this and whatever. And yeah, I love Twin Peaks. I love the vibe of it. I think what's special about this, and I talked about this a little bit in the intro, is that like this is so very much David Lynch, but without that like slight twist or turn that makes you uncomfortable. Like there are moments in this you're like, oh, he's gonna do it, and then he doesn't. You're like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah. And I think that's what makes this really kind of special and wholesome and just wonderful. And like, with Oppenheimer out in theaters, and I want to compare Lynch to Christopher Nolan just because they're two, directors, but like I feel like I love Interstellar because it's the one of his that like makes me feel emotions. Like it makes me feel like he's going for something,
which is rare for Christopher Nolan. Yeah.
And here it's like it's not the same thing, but like this there's like that scene kind of like where David Lynch has like one sort of speed, and I'm not using it as a negative because I love it, but then this is like he's doing something different, and like it makes it stand out because it's like, oh, that's, you can tell it's him, but it's something different about.
Yeah.
And it's just like so wonderful and special, and just I just love that like there's a David Lynch movie on Disney Plus that's like that's like yeah, kids, maybe shouldn't watch, but like could watch, you know what I mean? So
they'd be bored to tears, but like, yes, they could watch it. That's true.
But I just love it.
Well, you said you talked about the G rating, right? Which was kind of surprising to me because there's some pretty tough stuff in this movie.
Yeah.
But I think it just reveals the ridiculousness of the rating system, because like you can talk about horrible, harrowing war experiences and get a G rating, but you just can't show stuff.
This could have been an R-rated movie.
Yep.
It's so bizarre to me because like, yeah, it's so wholesome and beautiful and everybody should see it. And there's no, I think the worst swear is like someone says, God damn it, or something in the beginning. Right. And like nobody gets shot in the head. And like the way that the ratings board decides I mean, we talked about this with South Park, because that, that's an example of how the ratings board was sort of like challenged, right. Intentionally. It's crazy to me that like, I mean, I'm not like begrudging the fact that it's rated G.
No, but it should be like PG.
What does that mean?
Right. Like, because there's basically no movies are rated G anymore unless it's like a cartoon thing that is explicitly made for 4-year-olds. The fact that there's like a movie for adults ever made that's rated G, especially in the era where PG-13 is a thing. Like I know that like pre like 83 or whatever, like when Goonies and Jaws and Raiders were all PG and people were like, we need to do something because this is not okay. But like to have the complete flexibility, it's just like, this is goofy. Like it's not, I think what's also strange about it in like a good way, maybe not a good way, an interesting way, is that like so much like going into, and I think this is something that like a lot of the critics were reckoning with, when something happens, like when the pregnant teenager on the run sits down with him at the campfire, you're like, oh, this is going to break bad. This could be dark in so many different ways. And it is the most wholesome, pure interaction ever on screen. But like your brain is like seeing a film, old man, young woman, pregnant woman, vulnerable woman, David Lynch film, you're filling in the gaps. But like what's on screen, there's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
The toughest he ever gets with her is eat your dinner, Missy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he wakes up and you're like, oh, did she rob him? Did she take something?
Yeah.
No, she just said, I'm going back to my family with like the little bundle. I'm getting choked up. Like, it's just so, it's so sweet. It's so wonderful.
It is. And I think also like, in addition to the sort of absurdity of the whole ratings system and how that's kind of exposed here, I also was watching it being like, other people could just also make G-rated movies. Yeah. Like, this is still really great, and you don't have to not like whatever. You can make an awesome, great, amazing movie that's rated G that like literally anybody could watch, although not everybody. It certainly is not a movie like for everybody. I don't think this is a crowd pleaser of a film, at least not in the traditional sense. But it is not. It doesn't like there's nothing offensive about it. Like nobody talks about politics, even like there's nothing about it that anybody would like be turned off by.
He drinks responsibly. He has one Miller's Light. Tastes
Miller's
really good.
Light. I love that.
One Miller's Light. How's your Miller's Light? It's pretty good. It's pretty good. So Julia, when I was mentioning that in rewatching this,
John, did you see this for the first time in '99? Where did you didn't see this? I'm guessing it was like New York and LA and maybe like widely for like a brief.
No, I didn't see it in the theater. I definitely did see it within the year of it coming out, like
at like Blockbuster or something, like a rental.
Yeah, I mean, like one of my film nerd friends definitely had us watch this, and I wanted to when it came out, because I am of an age where I saw Anne of Green Gables when I was a kid, and so already.
Julia just lit up.
I was hoping this would come up. I didn't
Already
know if I, as the only woman, would have to mention it or not. But
well, let's go ahead. Tell us about your big crush on Richard Farnsworth because of Anne of Green Gables.
I think it was like I was a little too young to get into older men at that stage, But yeah, he in the Anne of Green Gables miniseries, which I think is dear to many people of all genders, it would seem, of a certain age. He plays cousin Matthew, Anne's guardian, who's also a man of few words, but many emotions.
Yeah, that's the only thing I've really, I mean, I'm sure I've seen him as a stuntman in things I didn't know he was a stuntman in, but the only thing I'd seen him in before this was that, and then he was in this, and then he died. So, yeah, it was, but no, I was very, and I love Sissy Spacek as well, and of course I love Harry Dean Stanton, but he's,
like, it's crazy that he's in he's in Red River, which came out in 1948. Like he had a life.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, he's uncredited. He's like a writer, but like he was in Misery. He was in Gone with the Wind as a soldier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, this dude,
he had a life.
Was born in 1920, died in 2000, was acting from at least the time he was, 18, 19. Like, that is, like, I could have gone deeper into him, but but man, I'm so glad. Like, it's very sad that he died and like had to like, probably had a very painful film experience of this, but like, I'm so glad that he was able to that they could capture the performance that he did. Cause like, it looks like he's a man who might not make it to see his brother. And like, it seems like that's really, what he was going with. And then for like, to think, I was also thinking about like Harry Dean Stanton, like, he looks old in Alien, which is 20 years earlier. And then he's still like in like I remember he was
Harry
in, like,
Dean Stanton was old his entire fucking life.
And like,
he was never not,
he's still alive and acting for another 15 or 20 years past that too. You know what I mean? It's just like, this guy was always old. And like, just their reunion, like he's third. I don't know, man. I just love it. Like, it's wonderful.
It's
I
great.
mean, that ending is incredible.
Yeah, let's talk about the ending a little bit later. I want to dwell on that for a few minutes. But so Julia, like, what do you see in this movie now as like far more consistent with Lynch and his kind of experimental, weirdy sort of aesthetic that you didn't see before?
Well, I think I remember him saying it's his most experimental movie.
Yes.
And I think that's like, we should take that literally. Like, it was an experiment for him to see if he could take this, straight material and find himself in it. And I think it's very sneaky because it looks like this uncut, straightforward piece of Americana. We have this like wide open plains and the swirling shots of the harvesting and all that. But it's still like David Lynch's America to me. Like, it's very, there is a bit of Twin Peaks, like what Twin Peaks is doing for the Pacific Northwest. This movie is doing for the Midwest, I think. Like, it's just a little off. It's a little uncanny in a way.
Yeah.
And I actually think that if there wasn't that Lynchian aspect to it, it would just be too saccharine to be the incredible movie it is. I think that beginning where Alvin collapses and we have like the view of Dorothy the neighbor with her tanning and her snowballs and her potato chips. And
honestly, living the goddamn dream out there.
And then the camera moves slowly and into the window, and then we just hear Alvin collapse. That feels very Lynchian to me, and that like we're discovering the strangeness and the darkness within this placid Midwestern exterior. And then I just think, they're just so many oddballs in the movie that like, it's just, these people are just like a little warped by living the lives they're living. And I think that's where the Lynch stuff really comes out for me.
I think what's nice is that when he also kind of subverts it when you see Alvin, when they go in to check on him, like his old man friends at the bar, like, I'm going to go take a look. And they like walk over to the house and they walk inside and he's just lying on the floor. Like, he doesn't look like he's in pain. Yeah. He's just lying there. Yeah. Then he goes to the doctor. He's like, I'm not doing any of that. Like, it's so peacefully, but you're like, oh no, like, is he going to be dead? Like, are we watching Harry Dean Stanton? Because it's about like a man visiting his brother. It's like, no, he also is, not right or whatever. But like I like that, Big Ed is here, just like also, as the John Deere salesman, just like the most upstanding sales guy. Like there's just things that like, like Julie's saying, like are Twin Peaksy. And he's reminding like this is the guy, and things are a little bit weird and the naturalistic in a way that isn't quite natural, but is also like hyper natural. And then it also is so filmic. Like it's just everything about this is just so wonderfully specifically him in a way that I think was the word you used, Julie, like saccharine. Like without his darkness, it would not come off, or like perceived darkness, or like he almost can't help. I don't know what it is, but like it's working.
Yeah, I also so like the opening scene, like the ways that I think obviously you're dealing with a true story framework for the most part, right? So you can't really veer too far from that. So Lynch has sort of boxed himself in terms of what he can and can't do to sort of David Lynch up this story. But in terms of going to some his kind of toolbox, I think it's pretty interesting, right? So like the beginning scene strikes me as sort of a very kind of soft resurrection scene where he's like, this is his sort of afterlife, kind of, right, where he's sort of like living out his final days. He goes to the doctor and he's like, fuck it, I don't need any of that stuff, right? I'm just give me two canes instead of a walker. I'm gonna make it there on my own terms, right? There's this sense of like he's reborn for however few months this is, so we can go see his brother, right? And I think that's sort of alluded to without being overt and without taking you away from the sort of hyper realism of the movie. But I also agree, Julia, that like one of the things in watching it this time around that I noticed more, or sort of like I was more receptive to, is a lot of those scenes of him kind of out there in the Midwest countryside, there is a sort of like weird eeriness and a weird sort of almost like threatening element to it that is both like beautiful and comforting, but at the same time like alienating and strange. And I don't know how he pulls that off. I know there's a lot of like really abrupt cuts in this movie too that kind of give it that sort of sense of being kind of disconnected, that I guess like any other filmmaker trying to work in this kind of like cinema verite, right, style here, I don't think would be able to like put their own finesse on it the way that he does, which is what I think is so sort of wonderful about this movie, is that it is still very weird while also being like incredibly beautiful and moving and real. It's like about real people.
There's at the end, like there's also things like not just the cuts, but there's like scenes where you feel like you're not supposed to be there. Like when his tractor breaks down like a mile or whatever from his brother's house.
Yeah.
And then like the camera's pretty far away and the guy in the big tractor, like the industrial size tractor, stops next to him.
Yeah.
And like you can barely hear their conversation. And it's like, are we supposed to be watching this? Like you almost think like, did they edit in the wrong shot? But like it also doesn't matter. Like you don't need to hear it all to know like what's going on. And it's just like, hey, did you try turning it off and turning it back on? Basically, and he does, and it's fine, right? But like, there's stuff where just like we're literally along for the ride, and then there's scenes where it's like the tractor dies after his friends are like, it's not going to make it past the grotto, and he gets towed back into town. You're like, well, that's the end. And then he gets a shotgun. You're like, is this guy going to kill himself in a G-rated movie 25 minutes in? And then he just blows up the tractor and buys a new one. And like, there's just these weird, you're just there. Like, you're just following this man, no matter what it takes, no matter how many times it false starts or whatever.
Yeah.
You're going to follow him all the way to Wisconsin.
Yeah. I find myself being sort of like, should I even ask myself the question of what this movie's about? Or is that not the point? Is it about nothing? Julia, you're more of a, someone who dissects and analyzes cinema more sort of academically than we do. So what do you think of that question? Is there a thesis to this movie beyond here's what happened to this normal guy and it's pretty moving?
Well, the thing that I got stuck on, like I was thinking about that meme of like, what will men do before they go to therapy? It's like, man will ride a mower 370 miles. But I also felt like that wasn't quite right because like he's very, we're set up to see him as this like taciturn, stubborn old codger who like won't listen to anybody, won't do anything. But then once he's out on the road, he's just so emotionally open
Mm-hmm.
and um sort of like giving and receptive to all the people he meets on the road, except the woman who keeps hitting the deer. Um, and uh, I think he, like this notion that he keeps insisting, I have to do this my way, I have to make it on the mower. I think what he says towards the end is like, this whole trip is a hard swallow on my pride.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like, like it has to be done this way for redemption, for the forgiveness of his sins, maybe even, and
Yeah.
like for forgiveness to be able to happen.
Because we see multiple people offer him rides. Sissy Spacek is like coming up with different alternatives, like how to get there by bus, or like at least get most of the way there by bus. But I think that's right. Like he has to do, like, it's, John, as a religious studies professor, teacher, I'm sure you could come up with some kind of extended metaphor here about, you mentioned the rebirth. Like this is like a, road to Damascus. Is that a thing? That's probably not the
That's a
metaphor I
thing.
want.
That's a thing.
Is that the metaphor I want?
Yeah, you could, sure.
Sweet.
Jericho Road, Good Samaritan stuff. Yeah,
but I think Julia's point is right. Like he has to do it this way, otherwise he won't feel like he earned the redemption. Even though I'm sure in reality, if he shows up 3 months earlier, his brother's going to be just as happy to see him.
Right.
Well, there's just something so magical to me about the way, I'm sorry, I'm going to the ending again, but the way Harry Dean...
We can get there in a second. We can get there in a second, yeah.
The way Harry Dean Stanton looks at that mower and that trailer.
Yeah.
And he knows, you see it in his eyes, he knows that's how Alvin got there. And that's what moves him. And that kind of is what makes, forgiveness or reconciliation happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's right. And he knows, like, if he shows up in a car because someone he met along the way offered him a ride the rest of the way, then that doesn't work, right? He, like, that visual image, the knowledge that his brother has of what he went through to get to him and his stubbornness, like, which is what apparently led to their falling out in the first place, being the thing that sort of, gets him back to him, right? I think is really, really important. The other thing that I was thinking of this time watching it is the sort of real the conversations that he has with random strangers, because he goes the long way, because he goes on this lawnmower, and because he doesn't take rides and like skip to the ending. We learn what it is he's actually confronting, and we learn about his daughter and what happened to her, and we learn about what he did in World War II and how these things are sort of, eating him up, and that sort of gives some sort of like validation to this very idea, beyond it being a sort of local interest story gimmick that it kind of was when the story was reported. When it really happened, right, it sort of says, well, there's something to slowing down and doing things the hard way, right? Sort of slowly on a riding mower, as opposed to taking a ride from a well-meaning stranger, right, to make it easier on you. It's not just like suffering. It is not just something that you should do to, redeem yourself. Like there's actually some sort of real benefit to it, right, in terms of like dealing with it and moving on. And in that light, right, that's why I love the ending. So you can talk about the ending now. So Julia, why is the ending so great?
Well, it's just, can I first say on a lighter note, it's just such a baller move to just have Harry Dean Stanton
For
in
2
this
lines.
one, this one scene at the end.
Yeah.
But I think it's just, just the way that they look at each other, and it's just like two fantastic actors, like looking at each other, and the way so much gets resolve just on their faces. And then they're like, he's on his 2 canes, Lyle's on his walker. He just says, sit down. And then we go, to infinity, into the stars, which is what he wanted, right? He wanted to see the stars with his brother again, like they did in childhood. And it's just so economical and such, almost minute acting, but just says everything we need to know, gives us everything we need for this journey to be complete.
Yeah, if anybody ever deserved a Best Supporting Actor nomination for the 2.5 or 3 minutes or whatever it is that he is on screen and the 3 lines that he utters, it's Harry Dean Stanton, who just in that, like, the way that he looks around and the way that he, like, carefully and meticulously utters those lines is just an acting masterclass. He fucking ruled. But yeah, I agree. Like, they could have hugged in a different movie. They could have been like, I'm sorry too. And then you're like, oh, yay, mission accomplished.
But also, it feels like they've never been huggers, right? Like, those dudes have never once hugged each other.
Yeah.
Can we talk about, speaking of, I don't know if I want to say acting masterclasses, but I want to talk about Sissy Spacek and whether, I don't want to bring the 2023 of it all into it, but like, is it problematic that she's playing an intellectually disabled person, or like, because I think that what one thing this movie does that's really, really effective that no other movie seems to do is like the scenes of both of them separately together, just staring out windows and thinking, and like nothing. It's just like, and then you hear her story. Like, I think it's when he's talking to the young pregnant woman, and like, he's talking about how his wife, birthed 14 children and 7 of them survived. Now he has Sissy, and she lost all 4 kids because, like, when someone else was watching them, all that, like, all the tragedy, all the heartbreak. And then you cut to her and just staring out the window, not moving, just like, oh my God. And like, she's doing such a great thing, and she's so funny with just like the way that she's like interacting with the woman at the grocery store and the woman at the dining room table when he walks through with a shotgun, and like all these different moments. And then you're like, again, maybe it's the modern lens. It's like, should she be playing this role? Is that okay? And I think she's really good in this, and I like her, but there's a part of me that just makes me at least want to have the conversation. Like, what do we think of this?
Well, I will say, in defense of her performance, like, I didn't even realize we were meant to read her as intellectually disabled until that scene in the grocery store where she doesn't understand who's having a party. Like, before that, I just thought that she, had a stammer and was maybe somewhere on the spectrum. So I do think it's played quite subtly, and then, conforms to Alvin's recounting later that she's a good mother, that she's, capable of having children and raising children and taking care of him and everything. And I do think there's this, she delivers the lines with the stammer, but what comes afterwards is always a face that is so perceptive and so intelligent that the nuances of the acting really make you feel that this woman is really capable and does really have a rich inner life, So that's what I would say in favor of it. Would we do it today? Probably not.
Yeah, I don't know that we wouldn't. I mean, I think this movie is also very careful and precise in exactly the same ways that you're saying, Julia, in also not specifying what her issue is. Because it could just be a stutter, right? It's not I am Sam. I mean, like, it doesn't like say like, here's Sean Penn as someone with this condition. And it doesn't do that. So it just sort of lets the character be. It doesn't dwell on it. It only gets acknowledged really once, when he's telling the girl at the campfire, right, about her. And otherwise, it just sort of is her character. So I think if you're gonna like do this responsibly and just sort of say like it's just the character that she's playing and that's who the character is, then I don't know that we would have. I certainly, Joey, I had exactly the same thoughts, right, as I was watching it again. Like, would this fly today? But Yeah, I don't know. It's such a. I mean, Sissy Spacek is like, how can you fuck with Sissy Spacek? You know, like she's amazing, and she can do whatever. But I just think it's handled so respectfully, right, on all parts, that I don't know. Maybe someone does have a problem with it, but I'd really struggle to see what that is. Right? It's not.
I'm not trying to bring it up to like say
Hilary
that I
Swank
didn't like it or that I'm
Brandon Tina
offended on someone else's behalf or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just
no, I know.
You know, this is the era. You know, you mentioned The Boys Don't Cry, and like there's so many different things from this season or this year of movies, and you know, different seasons that the Dane Cook performances in Simon's Head is way more offensive than this for different reasons altogether, right? But like, I don't know. It's something of the era where like it's something that, you know, would it be done today? Maybe, probably not.
Yeah,
maybe differently. Who knows? But again, like for a movie that basically has one dude you're following, and then she's in, you know, a handful of like really big scenes, and there's Harry Dean Stanton, and he just kind of comes and goes, and like who he meets along the way, you know, she's second build and she's got a big presence and she's great at what she does. It's just, you know, sort of a very specific choice.
I've struggled with this a lot, or thought about it a lot, and I think like it is possible to look back and still say there is care and value and thoughtfulness in this performance, while also saying, you know, let's not do that anymore. I think it's possible to hold both ideas in our mind.
Do you think that, so one of the weird things about this movie is, of course, that like Farnsworth was dying throughout it, and died shortly after it was released, and like, do you think that factors into this movie's legacy, or even like its power now, like that strange coincidence? Because I don't think anybody, like, it didn't come as a surprise to anybody. I think pretty much everybody on set seemed to know that he was really struggling and was deteriorating as the movie went on. But like, it feels kind of icky to me to sort of love the movie more because he died immediately after it came out, right? And there's this kind of like, I mean, it's similar to the Sissy Spacek conversation, this like ethics of how you go about enjoying a movie. But I don't know, what do you think about that?
Well, we can't take it out of our minds, you know, once we know, we know. And I think, you know, we bring our knowledge into a movie, so I think we can't avoid it. And I think, you know, I think we do see deterioration in Alvin as he goes along on his trip. And I think what we see is a man who may not have much time left, really opening up about his life. And, you know, we go through thinking, oh, here's this like loony old coot, to like, this man has lived. And he just gets more and more open about that. And I think, I mean, those are the most beautiful moments in the movie, really.
Mm-hmm.
They just get, his confessions or his conversations just get more and more intense and beautifully performed. And I think, you know, how can you not feel it more intensely with that knowledge?
And I think there's something to be said about the shooting in chronological order, which I don't know if they did that for that reason. I don't know if they did it for just because they shot it along the route and like it doesn't make sense to go back and shoot things in different. Like, there's any number of reasons that like you do it for that reason, which I know that most movies aren't shot that way. But to see like what Julia was saying, like you see a man sort of deteriorating, like doesn't have much time left. Like the farther along into the movie you get, literally the less time that both the character and the actor has. It's profoundly heartbreaking. But you know, you cast an old man, not that, you know, every 80-year-old is going to die immediately, but like, you know, you watch a movie this movie's 25 years old, right? So almost. And so you see like you see old people, you're like, you know, time, I don't know.
Julia, where would you rank this now? I mean, you alluded to in your college days writing it off as not cool enough in the David Lynch pantheon. Where would you rank it now in your tower of David Lynch?
I still don't know if there's a fire. I don't know. I don't know if I'm saving this over Blue Velvet or Lost Highway, still. But I do think it's just like a beautiful little masterpiece, and I have a lot of love for those that kind of movie. The auteur doing something smaller or something simpler, and like
Yeah.
what we understand about the auteur through the director going this different route. And what I will say, I'm bad at doing these ranking things, but what I will say is like I have a great fondness for The Elephant Man, and The Elephant Man is still a weirder movie just because of what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're both very similar movies in the sense that they're less let's call it surreal. They're more like standard narrative films that are based on kind of like really strong more or less realist acting performances.
Yeah.
And I think it's really great and speaks to Lynch's talent that those movies are so great and are, as we were saying, like still quite Lynchian in their own subversive ways.
I think I got a much deeper appreciation for the way that Badalamenti factors into like the Lynch aesthetic watching this movie, right? Because like the beginning music is very sort of it's very Twin Peaks, like the music in the beginning, and then it goes into like the very sort of pastoral kind of like J. Unger like fiddle music thing happening, and it really sort of grounds you in that sort of like Lynchian world where the music drives so much of what's happening and so much of the mood, and you realize how sort of important Lynch's collaborators are to him, which is like, I think to me, one of the other really powerful things about this movie is it really made me think about this sort of team of people he'd worked with,
mm-hmm.
and him, you saying how, what's his writer's name?
Mary Sweeney.
How this was sort of like her inspiration. Like she was the one who sort of latched onto this, and he was like, yeah, I'll do that. Right. Because like we work together and we're a team, and like, this is creatively what we do. And like, I think that's really, really cool. Like there's something very sort of revealing about his humility as someone who is known for kind of being an auteur, right, who has a very like distinct style and vision, and that's like, again, that's something I kind of got out this time around that I don't think I appreciated 24 years ago.
Is this your favorite David Lynch film? Did you say that? Do you have a favorite?
I think so. I think it has to be. Again, I like Lost Highway a lot as well, and I like Fire Walk with Me just because it's Twin Peaks, but like, yeah, I think this is the one that I would like watch willingly the most.
This fire that Julia's threatening us with, you would say this movie?
Yeah, it's the one I'd save in the fire, because I could watch this a lot, and everything else is like a challenge, right? And like that's not a bad thing necessarily, but like, Mulholland Drive is not like, hey guys, it's Friday night, let's throw on some Mulholland Drive, and
depends on how you want to spend your Friday night.
That's fair enough.
I do think that like, for as much as like people like, oh, that's so Lynchian, like that adjective is used both like as like a misnomer and like as a pejorative and like all whatever, and like people even use it who love him, like don't necessarily use it right, whatever, like I'm probably using it wrong too, but like I think that there's something to be said about like this is definitely an outlier in his career, but like he's done like 4 or 5 different movies that are like, he hasn't done that again. Like he hasn't done Dune again. He hasn't done Elephant Man again. Like Julia was saying, he hasn't really done like.
There's a reason he hasn't done Dune again. But,
well, yeah, but I mean, like Wild at Heart is a straightforward Wizard of Oz adaptation, right? Like, I mean, sort and not straightforward and not really a Wizard of Oz adaptation, but like within the realm of both of those adjectives, right?
But otherwise, like, all the things you just said.
But like you're like, oh like, man, like Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway and Inland Empire, they're so weird, and she's like, yeah, but like there's other stuff he's done. And for someone who's only, there's such a big deal made about like, well, what's Tarantino's thing? I would give all of Tarantino's movies up if we had like one more David Lynch. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but like I want one more thing. Like when he came back with Twin Peaks: The Return, and like the entirety of that doesn't work for me. But the fact that he was like, I'm going to direct 16 hours of television, and it's going to be like supremely dark and weird, and there's going to be musical numbers, and there's going to be an entire like the weirdest hour of television you've ever seen in your life, and like Showtime's not going to say no. It's like, yeah, let's do it. Like, that's awesome.
Hell yeah.
And whatever he's doing, I just hope that he's happy. I would love another movie. I don't know if we're going to get it. It's been 17 years since Inland Empire, so I don't know, man, but what a treasure. What an absolute delight.
I do think it's interesting that both of our Weird Davids released movies this year, and one is very much consistent with his work, and the other is this. So, the other being David Cronenberg.
Oh, well, there's another Weird David. I mean, maybe not Weird David, but another David who's very particular about his work that also had a movie this year. David Fincher.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And he's also pretty consistent.
The Weird Davids.
Davids.
Putting out work in 99.
Julie, do you have a favorite Weird David?
I don't know. Like, if
who are you saving in a fire? Cronenberg, Fincher, or Lynch?
I guess Cronenberg if you're making me choose, but it's really hard between.
Okay.
Really? You pick Cronenberg?
Yeah, because I mean,
he's got a volume the other two guys don't have. Like, there's more.
That's true, but just like The Brood, I can't live without The Brood.
Really? I haven't seen The Brood.
One of his movies is Crash, a movie I despise with all of my
I just bought that because it's the Criterion Collection at the Barnes & Noble, which I have not seen that either yet. Like, I feel like I hadn't seen any of his movies until like 4 years ago. And I'm like, this guy is pretty good at making stuff. Boy, oh boy.
He sure is.
No, I think this, man, I don't know. I just love this movie. Like, I didn't take any notes on this. This is a movie that I think you were saying, like, I could watch all of his movies a lot, but this is the one that I just, like, it feels like a treat. Like, the other ones feel like this is special, but this is just like, this is something unique and special and different and a joy and a present and a gift.
Julie, I have a question for you. If this is someone's like first David Lynch movie, right? And they're like, I'm gonna go check out the rest of his work. I really liked that. In terms of like the sort of humanity and pathos that he brings to this movie, right? Where do you think is like the next logical place that a person should go if they're gonna like start going down the David Lynch express?
I think maybe Blue Velvet, because I think like you transition from this idea that there's like this there's this kind of wackiness about Midwestern suburbia, and then you go into this idea that there is this like horrible, weird, dark stuff underneath the like American dream of suburbia. So I think that makes a good transition. I don't know about how like people feel, but that would be my choice.
I gotta watch that again.
That's one that when I rewatch, like, I think that I don't know how to describe. I don't even want to insult it in like the setup to the payoff of like talking about how good it is, but I feel like that's one that it's easy to take for granted a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that there were movies that he was more ambitious with and that were maybe objectively better or whatever. And then you watch that and you're like, oh, this guy has like only been making features for like 6 or 7 years by this point, and it's so good. Like, it's ridiculously good.
Yeah.
And it's like, how was he this good this quick? Like, it's bananas. So I think that's a very good, I like that pick, Julie. I think that's a nice from this to that. Get real weird in a hurry.
I also like, we haven't really talked about this. I'm just going to add this. Like the other sort of like Lynchian element to this movie that I kind of picked up on this time is that it's almost like aggressively normal the way that people talk. Because like my favorite line is like, what do you need the grabber for? For grabbing.
Perfect movie. The one thing I wish, he doesn't grab enough stuff with the grabber. Like,
we don't
really see him use the grabber. Like, it's Chekhov's grabber, and it kind of fails in that regard.
It would be sort of a gimmick if he did, right? It would almost be like a betrayal of the whole movie's idea if he did.
The thing I love is that the guy at the hardware store is just like so sad to be relinquishing his grabber.
Oh, jeez. It's so hard.
It's a damn good grabber. And he kind of like lovingly caresses it as he hands it over to Alvin. It's That's one of the great scenes.
Kids in the post Amazon era wouldn't understand that's you can't just get another grabber tomorrow. You gotta...
It did remind me kind of like a fantasy baseball trade where you're like negotiating a trade and then you make an offer and they say yes and you're like, oh, but I didn't really want it. He's just like,
yeah,
I don't know, $10. He's like, all right, ring it up. I'm like, oh, I didn't want to sell it. Why did I say 10? Oh,
I think in like the other like broadly kind of subversive thing about this movie is that it sort of shows that you can make an interesting movie that's not really about anything or very well structured, about like people talking like normal people and just being normal people. And like normal people are like really fascinating, right? Mm-hmm. And have stories to tell. And if you just like sit and listen to them, then it can be really interesting. Like, it doesn't feel like this movie was even written. It just kind of feels like people are just chatting, and I know they're not.
Do we have, in that regard, you just reminded me of another movie, and I'm wondering, do we have a Mount Rushmore of weird Midwestern films from this year? Because it's obviously this, and your beloved American movie, and also Drop Dead Gorgeous.
Yep.
Do we have a fourth Midwestern weird people just as they are? Love them or leave them.
I don't know. Probably somewhere in the pipeline.
It has to be 99.
Yeah, for the podcast specifically, because there's lots of movies that are like this. But I feel like
complete the
to have three that are that good, that are that kind of similar.
Yeah, I'm sure BJ could give us this answer immediately, just like off the top of her head.
I mean, Jawbreaker. Where's Jawbreaker set? Is that California or is that not?
That's not the Midwest.
That's not.
No.
I mean, there's the wild Midwest. No, we don't have 4. We have 3 right now, so we're looking for that 4th.
We're looking for the 4th. Yeah, we will keep an eye out for the 4th. I mean, American Pie takes place in sort of the Midwest. Well, Michigan, that's not the Midwest. Whatever, it's the Rust Belt.
Well, maybe when we get to Detroit Rock City, maybe that'll fit.
Oh, there you go. You go.
Not yet. Not for a couple seasons at least. But to have 3 movies, and the beautiful thing, like those 3 are not similar. They're not at all the same. But when you're talking about like, not as a negative, like poorly structured people just talking, like that's American movie. They're just like, look at these like weird Midwestern dudes talking about making a movie.
Yeah.
And that's the movie.
Yeah. I also think like, and we briefly touched on this, but I have to say this, that like the bartender is also like straight out of David Lynch, like Twin Peaks. Like the way that guy looks, I'm like, was that guy in Twin Peaks? And I looked at his IMDb and was like, oh no, he's in nothing.
Yeah.
He's in this movie and like an episode of like ER.
We watch him slowly shuffle over to give that other guy a refill of coffee, and there's no payoff. We just watch like for about 15 or 20 seconds. He walks the other end of the bar and takes care of that guy, and we go back.
Dropping a Twin Peaks guy into your movie. I thought it was that was.
They definitely had that look.
You did. He's like very creepy looking, and it's like Lynch is like, "I love you. You're perfect for a bartender. Come, give him a Miller's Light.
What flavor? What's a Miller's Light taste like?
Julia, any final thoughts on this movie before we wrap up with our final questions?
Yeah, I mean, like I could just talk about Farnsworth's performance forever, but because just like I'm a sucker for any grizzled man with white hair with blue eyes slowly welling with tears. Like just, I think this is just like a kind of performance that's like underrated and like really kind of difficult to do, where you have these scenes that build on each other and you have to kind of like develop the character and reveal more of the character while him still staying, like Alvin straight and, but just, he's just pitch perfect. And, like he delivers those Midwestern lines totally straight, but it's all on his face. And the eye movement and just how he shifts or turns his head, it's just an incredible piece of acting. And I just could talk about it more, but
his ability to almost cry but not cry, it is heartbreaking. It's beautiful.
To be clear, like this is one of the great acting performances on film ever, like period. And it was also a movie that made me resent American Beauty even more than I did before rewatching it. I'm like, what the fuck were people thinking?
Man, we're all suckered in by that plastic bag.
And that goddamn Thomas Newman score. I'm telling you, it's all about the fucking Thomas Newman score.
There's also Russell Crowe for The Insider.
Oh God. Well, we haven't even gotten to The Insider yet.
That's the thing. When I was looking, Julie, I was saying in the intro that I keep for like 6 or 7 months of this podcast, I could not remember the premise of the podcast, which is we're only watching movies from 1 year. Got that under my belt. Good. Proud of myself. But I can't remember. And now I'm not remembering, like, when I'm like, oh, he was nominated for Best Actor. Like, what else? Who else won? Who won that year? And I'm like,
Won that
oh,
year.
idiot.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same conversation we have
Always.
every single time. But of the 5 Best Actor nominees, we've only done Spacey and this. The other 3 we have not gotten to yet. So, like, there's still sort of big-ish, powerhouse-ish performances out there that we have not yet gotten to, because we've covered a lot of really good movies, but the things that the Academy was like, these are the best.
Yeah, Jason Biggs was snubbed, famously.
Sure.
Stifler was snubbed. Okay, Julia, you know it's coming. So first question. What, if not this movie, is your favorite movie from the year 1999?
You're allowed to say this one, too. That was a weird way of asking, but you can say this movie if you want to say this movie.
If possible, obviously, but I'm going to say the one that I left off my list, that when Bright Wall Dark Room was asking everybody to do their top 5, which is Dick.
That's like almost the third, like that's the third time in like 6 episodes that someone said that.
It's just incredible. It's like great alternate history concept.
Yep.
Great girl power, credible comic actors, great costumes, great soundtrack. It's how I learned about Watergate.
That's so good.
I think I first watched All the President's Men like because of Dick. And now I'm a Watergate obsessive. And
wait, for context, how old were you in 1999?
I was a sophomore in high school.
Okay. So how old were you when Watergate happened?
Yeah, I don't know. I just it's all down to Ms. Schoenfeld, our AP government teacher, who showed us Dick after we finished our exams.
Oh,
that was our
that's
treat.
A good teacher.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But as a now Watergate obsessive, I have to say Dan Hedaya, absolutely the best Richard Nixon ever to grace the screen.
Dan Hedaya is like, and I don't mean this like in a pejorative sense, but like your next best option after Harry Dean Stanton for like most of the roles that he had. Like they both are right in that same sort of like, if you're a casting director, you go to Harry Dean Stanton first, and then you go to Dan Hedaya after that.
I'm trying to picture Harry Dean Stanton as Cher Horowitz's dad, and I'm having a really tough time, but I'm trying it really hard.
I love Dan Hedaya.
I believe it's his birthday today. As we record, yeah.
Oh my god, he is dead, right? I am not wrong about this.
He is not dead.
No.
Dan Hedaya's not dead?
No.
Oh, that's great.
He was born today in 1940.
So he's just super old. 83. I suppose that's not that old. No, that's great. I'm glad he's not dead. I really thought he was. There's so many people that like I swear I think are dead and are not, and I'm pleased when they're not. So
he was in 2 movies that came out 2 years ago.
Harry Dean Stanton is dead though, right?
Yeah, he died a couple years ago.
Okay. That's good. I mean, it's not good.
It's not good. Julia, do you have a favorite movie of all time?
No, it's my question.
You took your sweet time.
The one I usually answer, which I think is fairly accurate, is Trouble in Paradise, which is an Ernst Lubitsch movie from 1932.
Okay.
It's about a couple of jewel thieves, and they plan this heist where the man is going to pose as the secretary of a young rich woman to try young rich widow to try and steal her money and her jewels.
Okay.
But then, of course, starts falling in love with her a little bit. So it's just like very sexy and witty and sly in a like pre-code way. And then you have the eternal question of, can you love 2 people at once?
And
well, when we do 1932, the podcast,
what is the answer to that question of can you love 2 people at once, according to the film, anyways?
I think yes, but maybe one is better suited to your life and your needs and your love of jewels.
Cool. I've never seen it or heard of it, and I will have to now.
It's just like sublime. It's like perfectly made. There's like not a wrong note in it.
I do like a good heist movie. So,
Julia, I found you on Letterboxd, but you don't really seem to use Letterboxd anymore, do you? Or do you?
Well, I actually, it's more accurate to say like I never got the hang of Letterboxd, but I think with the dawn of X, I'm definitely gonna shift
it's
over
wonderful.
more.
I'm going to follow you. You don't have to follow me back, but I'm going to follow you. I'm going to keep tabs because I'm excited. Because that's a kind of like, it's the kind of thing where like when we did A Midsummer Night's Dream and they were like, I was like, what's the best adaptation? Like, this one from the 30s. I'm like, I'm never going to watch that movie. I can promise you that. But the way that you talked about a movie from the 30s, like I would watch that because I like a caper. I like a jewel. I like all that kind of stuff. But like, I'm not watching a 1930s Shakespeare. Get out of here. What are we even talking about?
As a person who has a PhD in theater, like that one is overrated. You can skip
it is overrated. Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Now we got.
I mean, it's interesting, but it's like, you could skip it. It's fine.
Have you seen the 2016 version with Rachel Lee Cook?
2016?
Yeah, Midsummer Night's Dream. Yeah.
No, like this is a film?
It's really good.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's like really, really, really good. Yeah.
So who does she play?
Hermia.
Okay. That makes sense.
So I'll tell you what the cast is.
Do we have a good bottom?
They have a really, really good bottom. So it's 2017.
Okay.
It's set in modern day Los Angeles.
Okay. So
Rachel Lee Cook is Hermia. Paz de la Huerta is Hippolyta.
All right.
Fran Kranz plays Bottom, and he is fucking fantastic. Ted Levine is Theseus. Hamish Linklater plays Lysander.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's really, 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 really great. It's very funny. It's very clever. Like they take a lot of liberties with adding some sort of like Shakespeare jokes in there, and like they use a lot of like text messaging as part of the drama, and like it's very, very clever.
So this is a treat to look forward to.
And much better than the 99 version. But anyway, there's my plug. Julia, we already have like one. We've had 3 guests at the same time before, and it wasn't a complete nightmare. We already have one person who is on board for Dick. But
we'll say that a different way.
When we get to, no, I like saying it that way.
On board for Dick.
On board for Dick. But when we get to Dick, which is going to be probably in a year or so, be happy to have you join us for that one as well.
I would love that.
And you can share your love of that movie. I'm not going to say it. It's so tempting to make Dick jokes because it's right there in the title.
And it's the whole movie.
It's the whole movie. And the soundtrack kicks ass. And like, what a great movie. Easily the second best Kirsten Dunst movie of that year. Maybe third. Virgin Suicides is also that year. Anyways, it's really great. And it was great to have you. Thank you very, very much. And
thank you.
And look out for frogs.
Look out for frogs. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you, Julia.
You.